All right, Steve, sorry about that. Go ahead, please.
Okay, no problem. So we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We're going to go ahead and poll participants to make sure we have quorum, and then we'll move on. Just please remember to mute your microphone unless you're speaking. And when we continue with the meeting, please raise your hand with the icon, and then we'll recognize you. And when doing so, please state your name and your organization. So we'll go ahead and get started with roll call now. Susan Anderson.
Present.
Hugh Bigall.
Here.
Micah Henry, I assume you're filling in for Tricia.
I'm filling in for Tricia today. Yep, here.
Okay, Alan Galicia.
Here.
Albert Garcia.
Here.
Hong Ho.
Here.
Ying Yang Lu.
Here.
David Lucas.
Here.
And we have a new member starting today. Chris, with Pinell County, I don't want to botch your name. So when you introduce yourself, if you could just do a quick introduction, Chris.
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris Wanamaker. I'm the new Pinell County engineer, and I've recently been appointed to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Eduardo Dallas.
I'm here.
Raquel Schatz.
Here.
Didn't see if Ward Stanford.
Good morning. I'm here.
Mike Sutton.
Here.
Tessa Wessel.
Here.
Tony Whitfield.
Here.
John Willett.
Present.
April Wire.
Here.
Marty Zeich.
Present.
Great. Are there any other members participating that I didn't mention?
Bill Sullivan, City of Phoenix.
Bruce, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have quorum, so this meeting of the MAG ITS committee is called to order. We're going to move on to item number 2, call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour before the posted start time. This is the opportunity for the members of the public to comment on items that fall under MAG jurisdictions, but are not on the agenda or on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Omar, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee. We received no updates on this item or any other item on the agenda.
Thank you, Omar. And with that, we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. Please take a few moments to review the minutes from the August 4th meeting if you have not already. And we'll give you a brief time to look over those. Does any committee member have any revisions please use the raise your hand icon for your requests at this time. Seeing none, could I have a motion to recommend approval of the meeting minutes of August 4th, 2021? Please indicate so by selecting the raise your hand icon.
We have Raquel Schatz.
Wonderful.
Motion.
Raquel Schatz has made a motion. Can we get a second?
Bruce Littleton, I second.
Great. Bruce Littleton has indicated he'll second it. When I call your name, please indicate a yay or nay. Susan Anderson. Hugh Biggle.
Yay.
Micah Henry.
Yay.
Alan Galicia.
Yay.
Albert Garcia.
Yay.
Hong Ho.
Yay.
Bruce Littleton's already seconded. Ying Yang Lu.
Yay.
David Lucas.
Yay.
Chris Wanamaker.
Yay.
Eduardo Rodales.
Yay.
And Raquel had given us a motion. Ward Stanford.
Yay.
Mike Sutton.
Yay.
Tessa Wessel.
Yay.
John Willett. April Wire.
Yay.
Marty Zeig.
Yay.
Great. With a motion and a second, with members polled on the teleconference, the motion passes. We'll now move on to the program manager's report. The MAG TSMO program manager, Jeff Jank, will now provide updates and a report to the committee. Jeff, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. Next slide, please. The first item on my report is a federal update. As usual, I would like to invite Miss Tony Whitfield of the Arizona FHWA division to provide that report. Tony?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have 3 items to report an update on today. The first, Federal Highway just issued a notice of request for information in the Federal Register on August 25th. And this is for the redesignation of the primary highway freight system. Now, the primary highway freight system, it's a network of highways intended to reflect the most critical highway portions of the U.S. freight transportation system. And this redesignation is to happen every 5 years under the provisions of the FAST Act. So with this notice of request, Federal Highway is seeking comments from state freight advisory committees and other interested stakeholders. There is a 60-day comment period, so that comment period closes October 25th, 2021. And that notice can be found by visiting the link on the slide. The next item, there are 2 new digital resources from Federal Highway's Office of Research, Development, and Technology. And the first is a newly redesigned Office of Research and Development and Technology landing page. And that features highlights to key research activities, better access to resources, and spotlights featuring staff and laboratories and the Public Roads magazine. The second item is the Research and Technology Program Portfolio. And this is seen as a one-stop shop to learn more about Federal Highway's research and technology activities. and any other initiatives or projects that that office has in progress. And that portfolio will highlight all of those things from across the agency. And those two links are provided on the slide. And the final item, there's an upcoming webinar on September 9th. The Eastern Transportation Coalition is hosting this web meeting called Meet the Work Zone Data Exchange Project, How to Get Better Work Zone Data Out to the Traveler. And in this meeting, USDOT will share information about standardizing road construction data and sharing that data. And it will be followed by a roundtable discussion with coalition member agencies on how they are sharing their work zone data. There'll be speakers from USDOT Volpe Center, General Motors, and various coalition agency members. So you do have to register for that webinar, and the registration link is also provided on the slide. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony. You know, I'm really happy that Tony was able to give this kind of report, because many of us subscribe to the USDOT notifications from the different sources, and these notices or news came in the different emails. So it's very convenient that Tony could provide such a report as a one-stop shop for us, making sure that we don't miss any of the important initiatives. Next slide, please. The next item is a reminder of the call for project dates. As you know, that this year's TIP call for project has been issued or released on August 2nd. And so on the screen, you see these 4 dates that are most relevant to our committee members. September 17th is when the application due at 10 a.m. and there will be no acceptance of any late submittals. And September 24th is when all of the application will be posted on the MAG website and for committee member review. And the reason why there is a 7 days lag time after the due date is that we will use that time to review each of the submittal and looking for fat finger mistakes that need to be corrected. So I would like to urge the committee member to be available, and chances are we might give you a call for clarification of any of the information on your applications. On October 6th, this is an important date. It's a special ITS committee meeting in which we will be presenting, the committee member will be presenting all of your applications. And so please save that date. October 20th is about 2 weeks after the presentations that the committee member will be asked to provide your evaluation scores of all these applications back to MAG. So the remainder of the dates are December 1st is the first time we will publish this list of rank ordered projects or submittals by the evaluation scores. And then this list will go up the chain of various policy committees in MAG. Eventually on January 26th, the regional council will finally approve this list. And after that, all these approved, those projects that made the cut will be programmed in the TIP. Next slide, please. So this is just a graphical representation of the same information, but I do urge committee member to block the highlighted the time. Those are when most likely we might reach out to you for clarification or additional informations. Next slide, please. Well, the next item is an update on the upcoming ITS Arizona Annual Conference. As you know, that the annual conference is fast approaching. That's September 29th and 30th. I'm happy to invite the Vice Chairman of the ITS Arizona, David Lucas, who is also the conference chair, to provide one more update.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the MAG ITS committee meeting. On behalf of the ITS Arizona board, I would first like to thank those of you who have already registered for this year's conference. If you have not yet registered, there's still close to a month to do so. Definitely encourage you to sign up. The conference committee has worked extremely hard this year to ensure that our return to our usual in-person format will be a safe and successful event, and we definitely appreciate everyone's participation and support. We're currently in a sold-out situation for our exhibit hall. We've had great response to our outreach, so you can look forward to an excellent group of exhibitors from around the country showing off their latest ITS products and services. We already have over 350 registrants, which is back to our normal attendance level. So we're definitely looking for a great event with a lot of attendance. And as a reminder, the list of this year's sponsors and exhibitors, as well as the current draft program, are available online at the URL shown on your screen. There have been some concerns about COVID mitigation measures, so I wanted to assure everyone that your safety is of utmost importance and that a variety of mitigation measures are being taken to ensure that the conference is as safe as possible to attend. Per the latest CDC guidance, getting vaccinated remains the most effective way to protect yourself and others from COVID-19, and vaccine doses are widely available to all adults at no cost. If you're not vaccinated, the CDC recommends that you wear a mask in indoor public places, and masks will be available at the registration desk for those who wish to wear them, though they will not be required. And of course, all attendees are asked to respect the personal space of others during the conference. The Mesa Convention Center, where the conference will be held, is performing a host of intensive measures, including electrostatic cleaning of the event spaces every night, wiping out down doors, handles, other surfaces, and cleaning and disinfecting the restrooms more frequently. Hand sanitizer stations will also be available throughout the facility. So your safety is of utmost concern. If anybody has any questions about the conference, please reach out to me or anyone else on the conference committee, and we hope to see you all later this month. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, David. Mr. Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. If any members have any questions they'd like to ask, please raise your hand at this point to be recognized. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 5. In FY 2020, a new methodology was developed to evaluate the performance of traffic signal retiming projects. MAG has since expanded the performance evaluation of Tsop projects to conduct evaluations for all projects. Today, MAG staff will provide a review of the current TSOP evaluation, methodology, and future improvements. And Stanley Consultants will provide us with the performance evaluation results for the FY 2021 signal retiming projects. I'd like to invite Jeff Jank with MAG to provide an overview for this item.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, please. Tsop project is one of the well-recognized projects of a MAG that's designed to move the needles, meaning that these projects would provide the instant gratification in terms of improving traffic conditions. So Tsop project has been in place for decades. And in 2019, the Tsop, the Tismo group in MAG started looking into the evaluation methodology that has been employed and decided to leverage some of the latest technology offered and to use the new and improved methodology for conducting the Tsop evaluation. So this presentation, you're going to see the three parts. The first part is for Omar to provide a little history of the Tsop evaluations. Then Stanley Consultants going to provide the evaluation result of the latest run, being the FY 2021 Tsop evaluation results. And finally, I will provide some thought on the future improvements of the Tsop evaluation. So with that, I will turn the microphone to Omar.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the ITS committee. As you all may know, floating car studies, actually, next slide, please. Thank you. As you all may know, floating car studies are the state of the practice for evaluating traffic signal retiming projects and have been used for years by MAG as the standard for evaluating our Tsop projects. However, these studies are laborious and resource extensive, as you're sending a trained engineer to drive the car while another engineer is writing down all the notes and recording the travel times. So due to the laborious nature of these studies and their cost, in the past, we were only able to evaluate up to 3 projects or 3 corridors out of an average of 8 projects each year or each cycle. They're also limited in the number of runs or drive-throughs in each time period and direction. One could argue that it's not statistically significant, but that's the baseline that everybody resorted to and what the industry does. They also collect a limited amount of performance measures, such as travel times and stops, which are very important metrics, but we can do better in the sense of collecting more runs and collecting better data. Also, as a standard practice, MAG was using the 2013 published US DOT benefit cost tool, and MAG was using it to estimate the benefits of signal retiming projects. Now, this tool is a great resource for estimating the benefits of investments such as Tsop projects, but it is very generalized and does not use actual turning movement counts. It uses a lot of general assumptions and averages for volumes and speeds, which are good for estimating benefits when you have limited data. So in 2019, we contemplated the need for a new methodology, since, as mentioned, the floating car studies are limited in the number of corridors we can evaluate. This also stemmed from the MAG Systems Management and Operations Plan, and one of the goals being to highlight the impacts of projects by using before and after evaluation of corridors and exhibit the benefits of these investment costs, such as Tsop projects. So this methodology needed to help us evaluate all projects, be cost effective, and develop a standard for evaluating the Tsop projects. So in essence, we needed to do more, do better, and remain cost effective. So thanks to ADOT, we have Inrex data for our entire region, and this is something we wanted to leverage to remain cost effective and to be able to evaluate all Tsop projects. Next slide, please. So the new methodology that was developed by Kittleson and Associates uses 2 main tools to collect the data, Transync and Inrex. For Transync, we understand that this tool still requires the same resources as a floating car study by having someone drive the corridor using the tool. But the integration of this tool is an effort of doing things better. So the TransSync mobile tool is used for real-time diagnosis and evaluation of traffic signal timing plans by acting as a virtual controller, which runs the same timing plans as in the field controller. And then it overlays the GPS coordinates to show you the stop times, locations, travel time, as well as other metrics. It also evaluates the quality of the signal timing plan itself. And there's a lot more information we can gather on the performance by using this tool. In the past, we would have the travel times of the corridor, the stop locations, and as a part of what this tool helps with is overlaying the GPS coordinates on top of the timing space diagram to show you a full picture of what's happening on the corridor in relation to the signal timing improvement. So it's also much more efficient as you no longer need to manually record all that information. It does it for you and also records a video of your runs that you can review at any time and be able to better analyze the changes on the corridor. So the essence of using this tool is that we know that there are still valuable elements from the traditional floating car studies, and the TransSync tool is like a floating car study on steroids, and really justifies going out driving to be able to answer a lot of the other circumstantial questions and not just collect the 2 or 3 metrics that you would usually get just by the regular traffic floating car study. For Inrex, from the vendor standpoint, they're using tens of thousands of vehicles running through the nation and use that probe data to report segments travel times, or TMCs, which are predefined segments that are established through the US or Canada, and each country has its own establishment or own definition of the TMC segments. So this gives us, using Inrex gives us this continuous time coverage that you don't have to go out and drive, since the data is there 24/7, and you can actually get a lot more data points compared to the single person that goes out to drive 4 or 5 runs. So it can average that data and those many data points for you, and then you're able to see the average trend rather than the static point of time when you drive, or just the small number of runs or data points that you get. So it also gives you an extensive geographical coverage and reliability measures. So really those 2 tools, being Inrex and TransSync, are complementary in that sense. That when you go out to drive with TransSync, you're collecting the high quality information that you want to get from driving the corridor. And then using Inrex allows you to see the usual trends on the corridor and get data from how people are usually driving. Now with TransSync, we're still only evaluating 3 corridors, since someone still has to go out there and drive those corridors. But with Inrex, we're evaluating all 8 projects, or the entire cycle, usually 8 or 9 projects each year. And to also note that even though the probe data might not have a high penetration rate, there is still a lot more data points that you would get, but then by driving the corridor. Next slide, please. So now the final piece of this new methodology is, what do we do with all the data that we get from Inrex and TransSync, and how to turn that into the information we're looking for and exhibit those benefit costs. So Kittleson and Associates developed a spreadsheet that aggregates all this data, such as the turning movement counts for each location, speeds, travel times, travel time index, and other reliability measure for each location, as well as the project cost. And it produces these benefit cost evaluations for each project and each time period as well. Also calculates the reliability measures for each of them. So as a timeline, last year we developed this methodology with the help of Kittleson and Associates, and WSP did the first cycle of Tsop evaluation in conjunction with Kittleson developing the methodology. So this year is a second cycle of evaluation with the new methodology to be also somewhat of a feedback loop. And this year is the first time as a standalone evaluation after the methodology was developed. So this latest evaluation was performed by Stanley Consultants as the prime consultant and Y2K as the sub-consultant. And I just want to add that the team did a really fantastic job in managing this project and conducting the performance evaluations. So today, Stanley Consultants will share with us the results of this 2021 TSA performance evaluations. With that, I'd like to invite Natalie Carrick and Eric Berry with Stanley Consultants to present us with the results.
Good morning, Chair McKenzie and committee members. Thank you, Omar, for that kind introduction. As you mentioned, we were assigned the task to evaluate the performance of the FY 2021 TSOP projects. There were a total, oh, sorry, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So there were a total of 6 TSOP projects throughout the region, with a total of 12 corridors evaluating various weekday and weekend time periods. Following the performance evaluation methodology that Omar described, all 12 of those corridors were evaluated using the Inrex PDA suite. The 3 corridors in the light blue shade were also evaluated using the TransSync platform. The amount of data that can be obtained from each of these evaluation methods is extensive, especially with Inrex. So in the following slides, Eric Berry is going to present to you how the data was obtained and organized in order to document the results of the before and after conditions. With the number of corridors that we evaluated and the time periods, Eric is going to present the TSOP project on the Scottsdale Road corridor. Eric?
Thank you, Natalie. So part of TS 2107 was retiming the 12 signalized intersections along Scottsdale Road between Indian School Road and McDonald Drive. It's a corridor around the Old Town Scottsdale area. The corridor is a north-south roadway. It's approximately 2 miles in length with a posted speed limit that varies between 30 miles per hour and 45 miles per hour. The study focused on 3 time of day plans, the weekday AM, weekday midday, and weekday PM plans. The signal timing was implemented the week of June 21st. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we have shown the performance charts, which are collected directly from Inrex. And these charts provide travel time and travel speed data on a corridor-wide scale. I realize the text is a bit small on these figures, but the intention is to show how the Inrex presents this data. We'll get into comparing it a little bit further the next slide. Our ability to edit these figures in Inrex is a bit limited, but they are beneficial graphs. And in this instance, they provide a good opportunity to test your eyesight this morning. These charts are specifically for the midday period, with the travel time for the before and after conditions shown on the left, and the travel speed for the before and after conditions shown on the right. The before implementation data is shown in orange, while the after implementation data is shown in green. The 75th and 25th percentile data is also available, and that is shown with the shading around the main lines on the chart. Next slide, please. So the 6 performance charts that we collected from Inrex were condensed into these 2 bar charts to better compare the travel time and the travel speed for the before and after implementation conditions. So we noticed a decrease in travel time for almost all of the study periods, the exception being during the AM period in the southbound direction. The most notable decreases were seen during the midday period in the northbound direction and during the PM period in the southbound direction. As expected, based on the travel time trends, an increase in the travel speed was also observed for almost all of the study periods. Again, the exception being during the AM period in the southbound direction. Next slide, please. So shown here is a congestion scan, which was also collected directly from Inrex. These congestion scans offer the ability to observe specific segments within the corridor instead of having a corridor-wide segment observation of the data. So the specific congestion scan here is based on the travel time index. You'll see Scottsdale Road is shown in the center of the figure, with McDonald Drive on the top and Indian School Road on the bottom. The southbound before and after data is shown on the left side, while the northbound before and after data is shown on the right. With this scan, the dark and light green areas represent no congestion, while yellow areas represent minimal congestion, and orange and red areas represent significant congestion. So next slide, please. So the congestion scans were condensed into these summary tables shown here. The summary tables provide numerical values of the travel time index. So the travel time index represents the measured travel time divided by the free flow travel time. For example, a travel time index of 1.0 would represent a measured travel time equal to the free flow travel time, while a travel time index of 2.0 would represent a measured travel time that is double the free flow travel time. So looking at these tables here, the majority of the AM period experienced minimal to no congestion in the before and after conditions. That's represented by the green shading. There were minimal levels of congestion observed between Chaparral Road and Camelback Road, which is represented by the yellow shading. Moving towards the midday period, moderate and significant levels of congestion were observed between Chaparral Road and Camelback Road in the before condition, which is shown in the orange and red shading. The travel time index indicates that with the after condition, these areas improved to minimal congestion. Similar improvements were also observed during the PM period in these areas. Next slide, please. So Omar discussed a little bit of the new MAG's performance evaluation spreadsheet earlier. After importing the Inrex data into the spreadsheet, the travel time data was utilized to calculate an annual benefit. So shown here is the benefit cost output taken from MAG's new performance evaluation spreadsheet. The calculation assumed a travel time reduction savings of approximately $20 an hour to represent the vehicle's hourly dollar value on the road. The peak hour traffic volumes that were collected as part of the project were also utilized in this calculation. So the total annual benefit calculated based on this data was approximately $680,000, while the total cost for the to complete the retiming was approximately $36,000. This resulted in a benefit cost ratio of 18.8. Next slide, please. So as noted earlier in our presentation, TransSync was also used to collect travel time data with the floating car method. Shown here is a travel time run in the northbound direction along Scottsdale Road during the midday after implementation condition. If you could start the video, please. So, excuse me, the dash camera footage is shown on the left, while the time-space diagram is shown on the right. The time-space diagram is actively tracking the travel time run, as you can see with the red car symbol that is traveling up the screen from the bottom left corner. The software, as Omar mentioned, gives the data collector a real-time comparison between the signal timing plan and field operations. And it also allows us to go back and look at the recorded footage to observe the field collected data at any time. Next slide, please. So as with the Inrex data, we took the TransSync data and compared the corridor travel time and travel speed for the before and after implementation conditions. A decrease in travel time was observed during the midday period in the northbound direction and the PM period in both directions. As expected, based on the travel time trends, an increase in the travel speeds was also observed during these time periods. Comparing the TransSync data to the Inrex data, similar levels of improvement were observed in the PM period. However, less improvement was observed during the midday period, and slightly worsening conditions were observed in the AM period with the TransSync data. Next slide, please. So in addition to travel time and travel speed, TransSync is able to collect stop data, including the total number of stops along the corridor and the average time spent stopped. A decrease in total number of stops was observed for the midday period in the southbound direction and for the PM period in both directions. A decrease in average stop time was observed for the AM period in the southbound direction and for the midday period in the northbound direction. Interestingly, the total number of stops decreased while the average stop time increased in the southbound direction for the midday and PM periods, indicating less stops, but for larger amounts of time. Next slide, please. So again, MAG's performance evaluation spreadsheet was utilized to calculate an annual benefit based on the corridor travel time collected with TransSync and the peak hour traffic volumes collected for the project. The total annual benefit calculated based on this data was approximately $209,000, while the total cost again was $36,000. This resulted in a benefit cost ratio of 5.8. Next slide, please. So each of the Tsop projects were analyzed following the process discussed here for Scottsdale Road. These projects are documented at length in our report. The performance results for each project are summarized in the table we have here. The results include the change in average travel time, the percent change in travel speed, the change in number of stops for corridors observed with TransSync, as well as the annual cost savings and benefit cost ratios calculated based on MAG's performance evaluation spreadsheet. A benefit cost ratio greater than 1.0 indicates that the first year's annual benefit is larger than the upfront project cost. With that, I will hand it back to Natalie.
Thanks, Eric. So as you can all imagine, with the number of corridors we evaluated and the amount of data that was obtained, we learned a few lessons along the way. Next slide, please. So first, with the Inrex data, the roadway segments are generally beginning and ending at the major mile intersections. However, many of the TSOP corridors begin and or end at the minor intersections, which are not defined in Inrex. So determining when to lengthen the corridor or shorten the corridor for the evaluation is a key discussion to have with the MAG project manager up front, or even before defining the limits of the TSOP corridor. In addition, the Ellsworth Road corridor that was part of the Queen Creek TSOP project was not identified in Inrex, so no data was available and we couldn't perform the evaluation of that corridor. For TransSync, the first step is converting the synchro file to a CSV file that can be imported into TransSync. When doing so, the performance evaluation methodology mentions the need to uncluster intersections. Clustered intersections in synchro are those intersections that are running off a single controller unit, such as a diamond interchange. For those of us familiar with synchro, simply unclustering the intersection seems like a simple task. However, when the CSV file is prepared or produced, the CSV file still identifies the clustered intersection as separate nodes and therefore requires some editing of the CSV file itself. The methodology report, the final report, has included some information on troubleshooting these items. So anyone working on an evaluation should take special note of that section because it can trip you up a bit. Defining the recording limits. So prior to conducting the travel runs with TransSync, the team performing those runs should discuss the recording limits for beginning and ending the runs. With multiple vehicles collecting the runs, starting and stopping them at the same location is important. It's my understanding that TransSync D does have a function that starts and stops the runs automatically, but we weren't aware of this function when we conducted the runs, so we completed the start stops manually. This might be something to investigate prior to conducting runs in the future. The performance evaluation methodology report does state that at least 5 travel runs should be conducted in each direction. And if it's not possible within the 2-hour peak, 2 vehicles should be considered and discussed with the MAG PM. In my opinion, always having 2 vehicles collect the data for the runs is a beneficial approach. Even if 1 vehicle can collect all 5 runs, it's nice to have 2 vehicles in the event of an iPad malfunction or user error, which happened to us, or another unplanned event. During one of our travel runs on Litchfield Road corridor, there was a minor crash that blocked a few of the travel lanes for a short time, and it was noted in one of the vehicle's travel notes, and therefore that run was thrown out and not included in the analysis. But by the time the second vehicle got to that same location in their run, it was cleared and there was no atypical conditions noted. So that was an instance where having the 2 vehicles was beneficial. Also, the scheduling of the before and after runs. So with the performance methodology, it required us to collect the travel runs 1 week prior to and 1 week after the implementation of the new timing. Surprisingly, scheduling these before and after runs was a very challenging aspect of the project, and having to coordinate with multiple consultants and agencies to determine when we'd be receiving synchro files, when they plan to implement new timings, and if there were any planned construction activities was a lot to take on. And also any unexpected delays in the implementation of the new timing impacted our scheduling of the travel runs. And we usually didn't find out until the week of our scheduled travel runs. So, I mean, luckily our team was very flexible and we were able to reschedule the runs without too many conflicts. Finally, for the performance evaluation spreadsheets that Omar and Eric discussed. These are very intricate password protected spreadsheets, and they have a number of tabs that are that have cells that are protected and unable to be edited. And they only have AM and PM peak hours included in this performance evaluation spreadsheet. And so when we evaluated the midday or weekend peak, we have no way of modifying the name of that analysis period. So when printing the outputs of the results, they still show as AM. So in the future, having a spreadsheet that has multiple tabs for analysis periods, in addition to just the AM and PM, would be helpful. Next slide, please, Eric. This does conclude our presentation of the results of the FY 2021 performance evaluation for the TSOP projects. So at this time, I will turn it back to Jeff.
Thank you, Natalie. Great presentation. We'll defer any questions that you might have until at the end of this presentation. So next slide, please. I would like to talk about the future improvements. In 2019, when we experimented with the TransSync device, we were keenly aware of this product or device is well tuned for traffic signal retiming efforts. The built-in feature, that you drive with the overlaid time-space diagram and such. I mean, those are the great tool that for the field diagnostics that you're not only seeing a delay as you encounter, but you also see how that relate to the traffic signal, how much you're off from the green band per se. So it has been used as a good tweaking tool, being is something that you want to drive with and to tweak that final signal timing. So, but we decided to experiment with it, and we called it back then a baby step, that we bought 4 units of it. And we also consciously limited it, the application to just the Tsop evaluation. And since the evaluation is kind of separate from those retiming projects. So with these 2 cycles of experiences, and we also have a other debrief conversation with Natalie and Eric and others, trying to learn about what it all means of using the TransSync, the limitation, the challenges, and all that Natalie has provided. We realized that there's some learning curve that need to be overcome with. But we also perceive that the TransSync does have a value if you configure it correctly, right? If you overcome these logistic issues of using it. So the thought currently want to share with you is that we will continue with this TransSync devices. In the near term, we are going to move the TransSync into part of the retiming workflow. By that I meant, like Omar described, that we always have one separate evaluation project versus other, the actual retiming project. But to move the TransSync into the retiming workflow has the benefits of that will eliminate those logistical challenge of having a consultant to coordinate with another consulting team on when to conduct those runs and all that. And now it's all within the retiming workflow conducted by the same consultant. So another benefit of it is that we feel that TransSync does provide a lot of detailed information, but the current setting, all these great information, all designed in and rested in this evaluation report. But if we include it in the retiming workflow, then some of these runs, especially the post-deployment runs, could be effectively used to tweak the final signal timing. So that's the thought that we have. So near term, we would like to see the TransSync being included in the retiming workflow. But we also understand that there's a learning curve, and there are a number of steps. This is a major decision. For a year, we have been having the same statement of work with the inclusion of TransSync, that we have to figure out the level of efforts, and also that also means that all the on-call consultant would need to be familiar with the TransSync and as well as the evaluation procedure. So we knew that that generally means, and I'm counting my fingers, that we need to buy more devices, and we need to provide sufficient training with everyone that will be on this on-call contract. So we are now shooting for the upcoming cycle, but I'm speaking with a little hesitations that the next cycle is fast approaching. By next March timeframe, we will need to have everything in place to start working on the call for project. So we will see, but this is the plan of including the TransSync in the retiming workflow. In the longer term, last month, the committee member all heard this great presentation by Dr. Wang Zhang of MAG data program on this analysis of the vehicle trajectory data, or using their commercial name, the WAGEL data. That presentation was rather inspiring in that it shows that these trajectory data could actually do, one would argue, that provide a lot more sample than you actually run these corridors. And trajectory data is not much different than the GPS breadcrumbs. And with these fleets of vehicles running around, and that they have bared the great potential of replacing the floating car run for evaluation. Next slide, please. So this is at a high level what I meant. I mean, the right-hand side, these are the 5 typical tasks that we have for the retiming statement of work. Now we have to ingest the use of TransSync, and the before should nicely coordinate it with the crash data review, the field review, and the before run would simply just provide some useful information as to where the offsets may be off and whatnot. And then the after run that should take place after the finalization and when those signal timing plan are implemented. And again, before and after would provide you with the degree of changes that happened with the new signal timing plan. But then the after run would also provide an instant feedback loop to the implementation plan to further refine, if necessary, of these signal timing plan. So next slide, please. This is just to retouch on this, the WAJO data. We call it a long-term plan. While there are 2 aspects of the WAJO data analysis that we found very useful to the Tsop projects. One is the corridor level analysis, being able to define the corridor and geo-fence those and capturing every little GPS cars moving in and out of moving across those corridors, and that mimics the floating car analysis. So, and the diagram shows that with the so-called connected vehicle or WAJO data, these vehicle that has a ability to collect these GPS information for sharing, that you really get a lot more coverage than what the typical 5-6 run that we could get out of the floating car. The next slide, please. So another, what I called great potential or ancillary benefits of the WAJO data analysis is the intersection-based analysis, that literally you see these GPS breadcrumb moving in and out of the intersections. So if you geofence those different approaches of interest, you literally could capture things move through over a period of time, or as mimicking, you could capture by the turning movement, the volumes, and all that. So, and of course, you see a vehicle as they move through the vehicle, if there were a stop involved and the amount of the delay and whatnot, and all those can be measured. So things like vehicle delay, by turning movements, arrival on green, you literally see a vehicle stop, and or if a vehicle just went through the intersection without stopping. I mean, all those are in the data. Or the split assessment being, you see, we could quantify the amount of pro vehicle by turning movement and use that to verify the split, the green time allocations of an intersection. So I thought those are great additional benefits that we currently do not have. For instance, the floating car looking at the progressions, but one we're also consciously looking at if the new timing plan would inadvertently affect the side streets delay and whatnot. So these intersection-based analysis could provide such supplemental information. So next slide, please. So this is a long shot. The WAJO data, again, great potential, but currently it involves a lot of of configuration and a tremendous amount of computer time processing and whatnot. So to mainstream it into the Tsop, we need to develop a repeatable analysis approach, how the geofence is defined and such. Also need to develop and determine on what kind of reporting formats that we would like to see. So with these two, we could do the cookie cutting approach for all the retiming projects. And, and also by able to do that, we get to get the right estimate of the level of efforts involved. And of course, being such an emerging technology, I mean, these data are really brand new to the markets just for a few years. We have to consider the long-term availability for these data source before we tailor our program based on these data sources. So that concludes my presentations, and I would like to pause here and see if anyone have any question with any of our presenter here. Hearing none, I think I'll turn it back to Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Natalie and Eric, for your presentation. We appreciate that. With that, we will go ahead and move on to item number 6. This is going to be the Town of Gilbert TSMO plan. In early 2021, the Town of Gilbert completed their Transportation Systems Management and Operations Plan. The plan maps out a phased approach to improve mobility and information by utilizing technology. Today, the Town of Gilbert and Kimley Horn and Associates will share the process and outcomes of their TSMO plan and their TSMO toolbox as well. I'd like to invite Jeff Jenk to provide an overview on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to provide a little overview of this particular item here. And I'd like to congratulate the Town of Gilbert to have this successful plan development and the implementation of it. So I want to, in 2019, I remember Mike Sutton invited myself as well as the Aztecs, Faisal Salim, to meet with the town officials that I think up to city manager or deputy manager level, trying to present the regional resource of ITS and the collaboration going on and the public, the resources available to the member agencies. And around the same time, I know Town of Gilbert started developing their fiber plan, and then subsequently this Tismo plan. I think the remark that I would like to make is, oftentimes many plans got developed and got shelved and to collect dust, but clearly, a Town of Gilbert, this is not the case. I know Town of Gilbert were serious as they plan and these planned, and they actually leverage it and in the interest of the town. So with that, I'd like to thank Mike and Deanna being able to present this and share their lessons learned from the plan development and the implementation. Thank you. Next slide, please.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, members of the committee, for letting us come here today and give you an overview of the Gilbert Tsmo Transportation Systems Management and Operations Plan. It's a bit different of a plan, as Jeff talked about, and I'm going to go over the review of what it was, what the actual plan was, and then Mike Sutton is here with us to discuss what the town is doing with it. Next slide, please. So Tismo, as we all went through the development of the MAG SMO plan as part of this region, as an outcome of that, the town of Gilbert requested CIP funding in order to pursue this Tismo plan. And it's not the same kind of plan as an ITS strategic plan or an ITS master plan. It's very focused on the institutional side of facilitating transportation technology. All the different departments get involved. Staffing and organization is a very big push, and the focus of this plan is leveraging all of the resources that Gilbert has in place today, which is an extensive infrastructure package from the technology side that's already deployed in the field. But really focusing on making better use of that and also enabling staff to be able to provide the services to the traveling public that were envisioned with that technology. Next slide, please. We all know that transportation is a very visual component. There was a survey that was done prior to this plan beginning that it was visible in the town, that congestion was an issue. And while Tismo generally is focused on a roadway, we also did investigate other modes as well. So bicycle, pedestrian, ride share, kind of the future of autonomous vehicles, anything that would be lumped under the transportation umbrella that could be utilizing those paths was looked at in this plan. Next slide. So Tismo is a bit different of a spin on the ITS focus that we're all well aware of. But again, focusing on the people and the processes that are utilizing the technology. And we're looking at the entire life cycle of the process, from installation and implementation through operations and maintenance, and then also life cycle replacement. This will sound very similar to some Tismo focuses that have been conducted in Surprise and Buckeye. Although this is the very first kind of local agency Tismo plan in this region, and also one of the very first, if not the first, in the country. Tismo is generally a regional or statewide effort, and ADOT here is on as well. They have a statewide Tismo plan as well. So this was focused in here locally on the town of Gilbert. Next slide, please. The benefits are great for this kind of a plan, really defining that roadmap and consistent approach to support succession planning, regardless of staff changes. We know they happen. Making sure to make incremental, cost-effective, and impactful investments. We wanted to focus very strongly on the wins, the small wins that can create momentum in the near term that can support those longer term investments. And you'll see that in the approach to the development of the plan. Cost effective, that there's not always the physical asset infrastructure heavy type of project that comes out of a plan like this. It's staff adjustments, it's who's involved in which activities and who else needs to be involved that's not involved today. We wanted to also look through funding opportunities, obviously that MAG SMO and CMAQ funding being an opportunity, but also other opportunities to leverage other departments within the town, and then also potentially public-private partnerships. The town of Gilbert is actually very forward-thinking in being a town of the future, and so trying to leverage those activities as best as possible for improving technology use. And as I mentioned or alluded to, is the coordination between departments for an activity like traffic incident management. It's not one department that does that. It's multiple departments, and there was a significant effort as part of this plan to engage the public outreach group in town of Gilbert, which has been specifically reorganized within the town to provide better information to the traveling public. They have a system called Alex that provides that information in a kind of one-stop shop fashion. And so we, provided the recommendations and implementation strategies that would leverage that in a way that would make better use of traveler information for the town. Next slide. Just as a general sense of the project, these were the tasks of the project: stakeholder coordination, inventory, making sure we knew what was available and what was happening today in terms of process. Developing recommendations, implementation plan is how you do those recommendations, and then the final Tismo plan. So this task breakdown may look very similar to an ITS and other kind of plans, but it's very different in the types of recommendations that come out of it. Next slide. Kind of as expected, we invited departments, lots of different departments to be involved. Digital government in that bullet point close to the end is the public engagement group at the town of Gilbert. Well-staffed, well-resourced, well-funded. And at the end of the day, had lots of one-on-one meetings to make sure that folks had individual ownership and championing behind the activities in this plan. And one of the outcomes actually was specific department sheets that 1 or 2 pagers, easy to read, easy to understand. They don't have to go into the entire 50-page plan to find their piece of the pie. Their piece is very directed, there's a champion, there's a time frame, there's a requirement, and those department sheets were shared out. And to my knowledge, the town is actively working on those. Next slide. The general process that we undertook for this plan is shown in this graphic, and all of the pieces on the outside really help to inform the development of the vision, mission, and goals for this project, what the town really needed to get out of it. Something that was very interesting as part of this project was the addition of the capability maturity model analysis you'll see in the bottom left of this graphic. So many of the folks on the phone have participated in the FHWA CMM type workshops where you look at different model levels that you can define yourselves to be doing well, and then also define yourselves as potentially not doing as well as possible. And so we tailored that approach, that federal approach, to the town of Gilbert. And while the process was very similar to what CMM normally looks like, and the outcomes are very similar, what we get out of it, the way to actually tailor it was very different. So if you go to the next slide, Eric, in order to, it's the same topic, same conversations, but the way that each of these levels was defined was very specific to what the town of Gilbert needed to get out of this type of a plan. And from this analysis, had a couple workshops with all the different departments to cover all of these categories. And then at the end of the day, town of Gilbert ranked themselves to be in these categories where you see the check marks. And then also there's the intention with this kind of a process to make sure that there's a path to go. So level 2, level 3, level 4 are desired in some of these categories. I'm only showing the existing today, but there's a path toward getting to a more managed, more integrated, more optimized definition for themselves, and the strategies put in place in the plan will help them get there. Next slide, please. And all of these strategies, if you can imagine, we've got lots of departments, lots of thoughts going through about how to improve things. There's actually a lot of different types of staff there at the town, new staff, staff that have been there for decades. And so we got a lot of moving pieces, and in order to organize that, we put everything into relatable categories: infrastructure, people, processes, and data. What we wanted to make sure to focus the town of Gilbert on are those overlapping items, which are in the areas where you see infrastructure and processes overlaps. There's items that would impact both areas, and the town should focus efforts on those areas most. And when I say areas most, I also mean it would take the most effort to accomplish. So some of the activities I'll go over in the next couple of slides are infrastructure, people, and data, but really it's the investments that we expect in those overlapping areas to take the most time and effort and need to begin immediately to make sure that there's the most bang for the buck with the momentum of this project. Next slide. So I mentioned from an infrastructure standpoint, town of Gilbert's well equipped. They have a traffic operations center that manages all the devices that's in the field. There's some opportunities for infrastructure improvements, and there are certainly opportunities for infrastructure upgrades, perhaps older infrastructure or outdated that could be upgraded. But generally, it's a well outfitted jurisdiction, and so there are some infrastructure recommendations, particularly that would be advised for MAG tip funding or other types of funding. Next slide. The biggest difference with this kind of a plan is there was a very deep dive into the people. What positions are working in what areas, and what influence those people have on the Tismo program. And when we think Tismo program, we think traffic management, traffic incident management, work zone management, event management, those kinds of categories. And there's individuals that are involved, can't require that the same person's going to be in their job for the rest of time. So we have to plan for transition. And in order to do that, went through a pretty detailed analysis of activities that these folks are involved in, these ranks are involved in, and made sure that all of the areas that we were envisioning needing to be part of a Tismo program were covered. And where they weren't covered, realigning those activities under the staff that it should sit. And in that case, we did have some staffing change recommendations. I'm sure Mike will go over whether or not those are flying right now. But we did have some staffing adjustments, some revisions of job descriptions, and focus on time management. If you've got 24 hours in the day, 5 days a week, what is it that you're doing with your time, and is it making the impact that it should make? So this people was very important with the town. Next slide. And then also the availability of infrastructure within the town of Gilbert. And then, as Jeff just went over, lots of additional types of data. Wanted to make sure that the digital government group and others there at the town had the best use of the available data that is useful to make operational decisions and investment decisions. So we had a number of data strategies suggested for the town, and many of those will require interdepartmental partnerships, IT, digital government, transportation. So that's for sure a heavy lift here. I'm going to pass it off in the next slide to Mike Sutton to go over some lessons learned on the development of the Tismo plan, and then also what the town is doing to implement it.
Hello, everyone. Deanna pretty much covered most everything that we have there, but yes, there were. I'll just say one thing at the very beginning because I know there have been a few questions that I've heard going around the valley about different things. And when I came back here to Gilbert, because I did work here for 10 years and I saw a few things that were the same, and I experienced some things that I liked in other places that were different, and had some ideas about some new things. We found this old project that was coming along. And to me, that project didn't cover what we wanted it to do. And so what Jeff was talking about earlier, that's when I kind of brought in some people from MAG and from Aztec and talked about, what had been done in the region with their Tismo, because to me, it looked like that's something we wanted to do. And I wasn't sure exactly how we could get it done here, but through that, and through some of that collaboration, we were able to put together basically an RFP, and that's when Kimley Horn was selected, from that. And we were fortunate, to work with Deanna and Amy a lot, and others, but mostly the two of them, and start working on this. And some of those ideas that we had worked out, after reaching out and meeting with each and every department, and it was like, well, what do you need? Well, we need this. Well, this is what we need from you. And we were able to identify, through this project, some of those gaps and some of those differences, and put together a plan to address those, whether it was staffing, whether it was a reallocation of staffing, new staffing, whatever that might be, or whether it was maybe trying to do things a different way, or maybe set a goal out a little farther than we thought it was, and start working towards it, because maybe we weren't ready for it at the moment. There were a lot of things like that. And so it was kind of challenging at first to identify, like it says there, the right people to talk to in each area. And we had a few pre-meetings, and there was, I'm sure, Deanna can attest to this, and some of it ended up having to be, virtual, on some of it, but it's so much nicer being in person and getting people to respond. I'll tell you that, because you can at least look at them and say, hey, what do you think? And when their camera's off, anyways, it's harder. And so, but identifying those people and trying to get them a little more excited and involved, and showing how it could help them and their department, just like it was helping us. It's like, hey, we want to do things to help you, and we want, to improve, and we want these things too. And so basically, there's a lot that went into that, and I obviously won't go into that, too much, but from that, I'll just kind of give you a brief, idea of some of what happened. Even during the process, like I said, there were some things that I knew I wanted to do. And some of those things aligned perfectly, and some of them needed to be adjusted somewhat. But we were even able to make a few of those changes because we were able to identify, like, say, the amount of time it adds to add staff. And through this project, we're like, well, it takes this long. Well, if we were to put somebody in at this point, well, then this is when we can start making more of a difference. And it was easier to get a collective effort, a collective consensus from management and everyone else that, well, maybe we should move that one ahead a little earlier. So even during the Tismo, there were some positive changes being made. And so from that, there were some, staffing changes made here from some of the deficiencies that were identified. There was, we were able to hire, 2 additional staff here in the, what we call TOC or TMC, for those of you that call it that. And then we also were able to identify that there needed to be a reallocation of some existing positions, that they weren't, maybe they had the right title, but they had the wrong job description. They were performing the wrong duties, and trying to reallocate some of that and put them in the right place. And the beautiful thing about it is it wasn't me saying it, because when I go in there, it looked like, oh, Mike's just complaining. He wants to do this and he wants to do that. But collectively, when you had everybody looking at it, from, together, and they're like, oh, I see all of this. Let's make a change. And then it's written down and it's documented about that's something you want to do. It was so easy compared to in the past to put those positions in and get them approved that it was, it was still wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but it was so easy to say, look, you all agreed to it. Look, I've already got, the department director's buy-in. I've already got, my boss's buy-in. I've already got, it's like, and so everybody's like, oh yeah, we already agreed to that. So, things went smoother. And then there were some other initiatives, which Deanna kind of touched on too, with meeting with digital, meeting with PD, meeting with fire, meeting with IT, and other areas of public works. One of the big, I would say, roughest staffing changes, still everyone's in support of, but was basically moving all of our field staff that's related to traffic signals back over to engineering. And I know there's different flavors of that all across the valley, but from everyone's collective effort and input and whatever else, that was the decision that was made. So that's actively happening, and probably will happen before the end of this year. And there will be additional staff hired as well for some of the management, because some of the management will stay there. So, but you can imagine how logistically what a nightmare that is when you're talking about buildings, equipment, even where they take their breaks, even just all kinds of things. And so that happened. But those other meetings with the other departments have still been ongoing. I just actually had one yesterday with fire, and there were some things that they wanted, some things that we had talked about internally, and some things that they had started working on that we hadn't even, I know it seems simple, but we hadn't even collaborated on. But we could go back to the document and the meeting summaries that happened and the things that they said they wanted from us, and it's helped to clarify some of that and create an atmosphere or a relationship where it's just been better to try and reach some of those mutual goals or even individual goals. And those are still ongoing today, and I don't want to take up any more time. So if there's any questions you have for me, let me know. Or Deanna.
Do also,
Especially Deanna.
I want to give credit where credit's due. We also had WSP, Scott, back on our team as well. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood.
And with that, I think the next slide, I think that's probably about it. Yeah. So if there are no questions, I'll turn that back over, to our chair. And thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you, Mike and Deanna. That's it's been very helpful information, and we're excited to probably hear more about this in the future as you implement more changes. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 7. I'll just, but with a raise of hands, if any committee member have any topics or issues of interest that you would like to have considered for discussion at a future meeting, please indicate so. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. I'm going to go ahead and we'll start with Susan, and I'm going to go through all the list of committee members, and if you have any information that you would like to share related to ongoing ITS related projects in your jurisdiction, this will be your opportunity. So with that, Susan.
Good morning, everyone. ADOT's got a lot of projects underway, of course. The one I'm most excited about is going to be our ITS master plan. We'll be kicking off here within the next month, and a 15-month schedule to get that going. So I'm sure we'll have lots of lessons learned next year to be sharing as well. So exciting to hear how the town of Gilbert's been working, and I look forward to ADOT having something similar in place. So thank you all. Other than that, nothing else real big. So the same projects are underway. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. Hugh,
Nothing for Goodyear. Thank you.
thank you. Micah,
No updates for Mesa.
thank you, Micah. Alan,
No update from Glendale this month.
okay, thank you. Albert,
No updates for Surprise either.
okay, thanks, Albert. Hong,
No update. Thank you.
thank you. Bruce,
Just wanted to thank the committee for the support that we got on the MAG ITS, on the SMO. We had two fiber projects that were in under our last submission. Indian School was done last year and is under construction, and we just finished getting Baseline Road through the authorization process, so that'll be starting construction this coming year. So again, want to thank MAG ITS committee for supporting our projects, and we are moving forward with them.
thank you, Bruce. Ying Yang Liu, okay, we'll move on now. David,
No updates from Tempe. Thank you.
thank you. I'm next in the order. I have no updates from Peoria this round. With that, we'll move on to our newest member, Chris Wanamaker.
Hi, I have no updates for Pinal County at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Eduardo?
Nothing from City of Maricopa.
Thanks. Raquel?
Nothing from Apache Junction.
Okay. Ward?
Nothing from Avondale. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Ward. Mike Sutton.
You've already heard enough from me today. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Tessa Wessel.
Yeah, so the city of El Mirage just recently had flashing yellow arrows, left turn arrows installed at 8 of our intersections here in the city as part of MAG's roadway safety program. It's our first installment of flashing yellow arrows, and they seem to be working out great.
Thank you, Tessa. Tony, do you have any further updates from FHWA?
Nothing else from Federal Highway. Thank you.
Thank you. John Willett?
Nothing from City Buckeye.
Okay, thanks, John. April Wire?
Nothing from McDOT.
Okay, thank you, April. Marty?
Nothing from Valley Metro.
Okay, thank you. And I think I had seen Marshall show up. Marshall, do you have any updates?
Yeah, so we opened our bids, or ADOT opened the bids for our ATS PM project, and we were successful in having it be below the engineer's estimate. And so that project's moving forward. We'll be having a kickoff meeting with ADOT and the contractor in the next couple of weeks, and that should be underway fairly quick. So that'll be quite a change in how we do signal timing for Queen Creek, and we'll move on from there.
Thank you, Marshall. With that, we'll go ahead. Next item, the next meeting of the Intelligent Transportation Committee will be held at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, October 6th, 2021 via virtual conference unless otherwise notified. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting and give you some time back in your day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.